Hey friends out there in YouTube land, Rob here. Today I want to talk to you about this cute little camera, the Polaroid Go. Shoots this tiny film, and we'll get into all the fun things like features and everything today. And I'll share a lot of my tips about how I use this camera, specifically some comparisons to other cameras like Polaroids themselves, as well as how to use a flash with a camera like this as a pro tip at the end. So if you're ready, let's jump right into it. Okay, as we are here, we've got this nice little Polaroid Go camera. It's a tiny little camera. Fits in the palm of your hand. Feels great. All the edges are smooth, so it really cups in your hand very nicely. Pretty much goes anywhere you want it to go, and it's very unassuming. There's not a lot of exterior flair that goes on with it. It's very minimalistic in its design, and I think that's part of the appeal to this camera. This little camera can be had in white, black, and red, maybe some additional colors, and I really like the white. The black is great too. I think red was new for 2024. When we look at the camera, we actually see a xenon flash, which is very important right here. And then we also get a self-countdown timer, which will give us our 10-second delay timer. We have our autofocus lens. We'll talk about how that works with the shutter in a second. And then we have our viewfinder. The viewfinder allows us to see straight through the camera, but notice that it is offset from the lens. That means that you'll have some parallax with things that are closer. Parallax is the difference in what you see through the viewfinder based on what the center-mounted lens will take and how it shows up on your photo. I'll show you some examples of that later and give you some pro tips when you're doing portraits or self-portraits on how to get the best images. Now, we also have something special right here. I don't know if you can see on the lens, it might be, or the viewfinder, this actually has a slight coating that allows it to be reflective so that when you're holding it at your arm's length, you can actually see yourself in that, kind of like a two-way mirror, which is really pretty cool. When we continue on to the other side, we're going to have our charging port, which in this case is a micro USB, and it's got a little LED. It will light up with a particular color to let you know just how much energy is left in the device. Currently it's green, which means we're pretty much full charge. Moving to the back, we see that we have a power button as well as a viewfinder right here. Once we turn over to the side, we'll see there's nothing on this side. There's a little indent. This is kind of a registration mark for when they're making them, and we're back to the front. Looking down at the top, we see that there's a shutter button. This shutter button right here has a half press where detent stops when you press it in halfway, and then a further press, which requires much more force. Now, these are things that you can easily do with one finger. No one will have a problem, but it's nice to note that this soft release is detented so you'll know when the camera is half press focusing, full press taking the picture. As we come right here, we actually have our flash button. And this button is actually multi-functions, and it has 3 different functions. Number 1, it turns the flash on and off. I'm going to turn it over here so that you can see the flash indicator by our numeric display right there. When we press the button once, the little flash indicator goes off. When we press it again, the flash indicator comes back on. That's great, but it does take a second. So if you're not used to that, it literally takes 1 second for it to turn on and off. So if you're trying to shoot fast and you're not paying attention, you could be turning the flash on or off. Now, the nice part about this is most cameras, especially Instax cameras, don't allow you to turn your flash on or off. So it's nice to have control over the flash. Notice here we have a real xenon flash as well. That means that the flash that we're using is a strong, powerful flash. You're going to enjoy it quite a bit. The next thing is that we've got a press and hold function. If we press and hold it, you'll see there's a little light that turns on underneath the flash. That light is going to let you know that you're ready to go for your self timer. And if you press and hold again, the light will go off. So this button now has 2 functions. Turning back around to the end, we're going to show you what happens if you press quickly. Double tap, 1, 2. You'll notice now we have a 1 blinking in the viewfinder. That blinking 1 is letting you know you are on multiple exposure and this is your first shot. Once you focus and take the image, it will then change to 2. I have no film in here. I'm going to double press again to go back to normal, so it's reading 0 film. If you had film in here, it would have taken the first exposure. It will automatically eject after the second exposure. As we turn on to the bottom, we see where we would load the film. And that's just exactly how it opens up right there. Let's get you guys a nice look on the inside if I can. There you go. Okay, now that's done, let's go ahead and talk about the experience you can expect to have with Polaroid. First of all, let's look at the size. I've gone ahead and brought up a nice little image right here that you'll see of the beach. This is Polaroid as opposed to Instax film. We'll talk about that later. And this is another Polaroid from the regular full-size 3-inch Polaroid. Notice same images and the different size that you're going to get between the two. All in all, Polaroid has a color set that is unique to Polaroid. That's because the development times are inconsistent and they vary based on temperature and sometimes other weather phenomena as well, like humidity can get in there. Generally speaking, a red or magenta hue will come when it's too hot, and a greenish yellow hue to your photo will come when it's too cold. And I can say that the Polaroid developments that Polaroid, the company, is making have gotten better over time. But this is more of a warning that when you're shooting with Polaroid, you need to make sure that you're careful with the temperatures if you want to get a consistent photo. Let's talk about that kind of consistency real quick. When we look at pictures taken on the same day, this is a Polaroid Go image that's taken in the cold. Notice we've got that nice contrast image. And here's one taken on a different day. It's in the bright sun, nice and warm day out, and this one has sat in the car. If you can see the difference in the contrast, you notice that the sunlight or the heat from the car over time, this picture right here of my son and I, me and this shirt, were taken, and it's been sitting in the car for about 4 months. One of my favorite photos, so I had to bring it out of the car because, well, it was fading. That's not something I've noticed with things like Instax. If you want to have good contrast on your images, like you see right here, then you're going to really need to monitor the temperature well and make sure that you're doing your experiments to make sure you know what works for your film, and then how the film is handled and stored afterwards. To give you another example of something that doesn't really just hold up over time is, here's an indoor shot taken at nighttime at this past Christmas, and it was kind of warm 70, 75 at the time that we took the photo, and look how it's just kind of muddy. Now that xenon flash was providing a lot of light, but this image just kind of came out funky. So if you see the difference in the photos that we're talking about, you'll notice right off the bat that we can go from great to kind of crappy in just a matter of moments. Something else that I want to talk about, and this shouldn't keep you from wanting to use the camera. What I'm trying to do is share with you the expectation that you can have when you start buying film for this camera and using it. On more than one occasion, I've probably taken 300 images with this camera since I've had it over the past year. Polaroid Go film is 18 or 16 shots for $20. It can get kind of expensive. More than once, I'm probably 10 or 12 times I've had images or slides that pop out like this. This right here has to do with how the Polaroid film was stored before purchase. And this is just old film stock, which means that when you're buying Polaroid film, buying film from places like Best Buy and Amazon are very, very risky in my opinion. I've had the best results when I've bought my film from Polaroid.com, the original Polaroid site, so that you can actually get the film as it's intended because they store it at the proper temperatures. Now, if you watch anything about instant film, specifically from back in the day, you'll notice that one way to preserve film is to put film in your refrigerator. Don't freeze the film, put it in your refrigerator. And that is something that will totally help the lifespan of the film that you're using. This is not something that happens when we shoot Instax film. You can shoot Instax film any day of the week and it doesn't care. Keep it in the sun and it's fine. Original Polaroids from the 1970s and 80s used to be that way. They didn't have these kinds of problems, but there was a whole host of things that happened with the original recipe for Polaroid film when Polaroid went bankrupt back in the 2000s. Now, the Polaroid was revived by the Impossible Project, became Polaroid Originals, and now is Polaroid. But back in the day, you used to have 10 shots per frame of film, per sleeve of film pack. Now you get 8. And the reason is because the Impossible Project, the Polaroid Originals, Polaroid, the new company that it is now, had to completely re-engineer their whole packaging process and chemistry because the original recipe was lost. And when they bought the rights, Polaroid, or the Impossible Project bought the rights back in the day, they had to reverse engineer that entire process, which is something they're still doing. Now, I would like to say that over years of shooting on Impossible Project film, Polaroid Originals film, and Polaroid film, that group is the same group that is now today's Polaroid, and the film has gotten so much better that it's very reliable. What is not as reliable is the long-term storage in sunlight and things like that. However, sometimes that's exactly what you want. Let's talk about using a bug as a feature. I don't look at this image and think, man, I don't like it because it's been in the sun and it's faded. I look at it and think, that's how I remember it. What a beautiful image indeed. And it's just such a fun photo for me that I can't forget it and want to keep it with me everywhere. When we think about those Polaroid colors, it's exactly that reason that we were talking about, that inconsistency that makes a shot like this, and then the companion shot on the Polaroid now One Step 2, so fun and exciting to look at. And it's exactly because they are kind of difficult shots to get, right? And they look great. These Polaroid colors are just images you can't get anywhere else. If I take a picture like this with my Instax camera, it looks so true to life, it almost doesn't look like what I saw because it's so realistic. The Polaroid images add additional characteristics that make it more like a memory. I guess that's the best way I can explain it, and it's one of the reasons that I absolutely love it. When we talk about these shots, I have both of these as my wallpaper for my phone and my desktop, and it's just a lot of fun. That's something that you can use when you take a Polaroid picture. You can download the Polaroid app, scan the Polaroid, and it will save the photo in an archive on your phone or in an app on your phone so that you can share it. And it does all kinds of cool stuff, but that's how I get those types of things as wallpapers. And this is Virginia Beach. I want to share with you some other ideas. Here's another Polaroid shot from the Polaroid now, or the Polaroid One Step 2. Let's see if I can get this just to sit up here. Maybe, maybe not, it doesn't matter. As we look, I wanted to kind of share with you just some differences in placement between Instax as well as Polaroid. I wanted to give you an idea so that you could see the different kinds of developments. Notice the Instax print, the smaller one, this is the Instax Mini, is sharper quite a bit, has to do with the lens, and it's also a little bit more vibrant of color with much more contrast. That's something that you're going to notice whenever you're shooting Polaroid compared to Instax and other brands. Instax is really going to try to do its best to give you a real true-to-life view of what you see. Moving back to the Polaroid Go, I just can't take away the fact that it's an absolutely beautiful little image. Check this guy out right here. This is so much fun. My kid's sitting down at the bench at Grommet Island. Here's the other one that we were talking about from before. Here's another one right there. These are just great images from one day and all shared and saved on the Polaroid Go. But not all is fun and exciting. This is part of the inconsistency. Considering that this is a completely automatic camera, you've got no way to adjust for exposure with exposure compensation or anything, and the camera is going to meter in a couple of different ways. First of all, the aperture is already an f12. That's a very small aperture, lets in very little light, and it goes as small as f22. And the shutter speeds that it has is 30 seconds all the way up to 1/125th of a second. That means that when you go out to photograph in the light, even on a bright day, you're already around a 1/30th to 1/50th of a second at f12 shutter speed. And that induces a lot of camera shake if you're not careful when you're taking the image. And what the camera will do when it sees a very bright day, it will automatically push that shutter speed all the way up to its fastest, 1/125th. That's why there's no motion blur here. But it will open the aperture only as wide as it can go, which in this case is f12, which is a pretty small aperture, meaning that we get these small shots. Now, how do we get around that? How do we go from an image like that to something like this where it's obviously exposed better? Well, the answer is flash. Because the camera is going to shoot with flash and we can turn it on and off, we can make sure that we're always shooting with flash. So in this instance, the flash was on because I always shoot with flash with these cameras, but the camera was too far away from me. The flash is only good enough to illuminate about 6 to 7 feet properly. So anything outside of that range, I'm probably 10 or 12 feet away at this point right here, maybe 10 feet, and everything just becomes dark. So you need that flash. Also, I don't know this from any manual, but the autofocus, when you half press the lens, will choose either a close or a wide lens. Now, that may seem like you think you're focusing into a particular place, but really you're focusing from 3 feet and closer at the macro or close distance, and then from about 4 or 5 feet to infinity for the other lens. So if you're somewhere on an in-between range or something like that, you're going to get a slightly out of focus or slightly blurry image because this is not a autofocus camera, it's an autofocus zone focus camera. Here's another great shot of my kids on the rocks, and we're just gonna kind of complete this out with a picture of me standing here on the rocks. The reason this is important is because as you're looking, I want you to see the difference for types of shots you can get in the same area. This is the Mint SF70 taking a picture, and there's just no contest here. There's no question. Not only do we have a brighter image, the sharpness is better, the colors are better, it's on Instax film, but we actually have a manual camera. And we're shooting the square, the SF70 on this particular image, a beautiful shot of the dolphin, and an average shot, really. This is just a standard shot that I would expect to get from the SQ70 compared to this shot right here, or even the best shot of the day with my kids and I, and we still see that there's quite a bit of contrast. The image of my kids and I is a little underexposed. Once again, that has to do with the fact that it's limited in its range of shutter speeds and apertures. The question I'm going to answer now is, after you heard that, you might wonder, well, why does that even matter? And you're right, it doesn't. This doesn't make this image any less important. The point that I'm kind of pointing out to you, what I'm sharing with you, is that there are differences between the two that will have an appreciable difference in the type of image that you take. Here's a shot from the Instax Mini Evo compared to a shot like we saw earlier of my kids, and we have a very similar type of presentation here. Although the Mini Evo is a little bit brighter, I think that the colors and the vibrancy are very comparable. So under the right circumstances, and when you're shooting on a bright sunny day with lots of light, you're going to get excellent shots. Okay, we've talked about those. Let's talk about shots, and this is, if you've seen my other videos, you'll recognize that the shots I just showed you with the Polaroid Go are the better of the shots that you'll get with it. Most of the time, specifically with wide subjects that might be forested or gardened or in shadows of buildings and things like that, think cityscapes, you're going to get shots like these. And the purpose here is to show you not only how small your subject is on an environmental shot compared to everything around, but also what happens to the detail in your area because of the contrast of the film. Now this is a cool shot. It was actually taken in a forest with my son where there is just a little beam of light speaking through the trees and there's a river in the background right there. And so he's standing in that little oasis of light and we can't even see any of the detail around it. Does it make for an interesting shot? Absolutely. But I want to give you a full view of what you can expect with this kind of camera because these are more of the type of photos that I get for the style of shooting that I do. Now, I also went ahead and used this for some background photography, for some photo booth photography, just to see how it would do when I was doing a test for one of my brides. And the reality is, do not use this camera at all for a photo booth camera. Number one, it's expensive. Number two, you will not like the results. Standing out in a field where the farm is behind my house, lots of horses and things, and we just get more and more of the same. Okay, those images were dark, but let's compare that to one thing we would have right here. Here's a picture of my son with the Polaroid Go, and in the exact same position, we've got a picture of my son and I with the SF70, and off-centered because my youngest son took the picture, and then here's an overexposed picture with the SF70 as I was photographing. Here I wanted to share with you detail, but notice I got to set the camera to get the kind of shot that I wanted. So I could expose for the sky and some of the detail in the subject, but here I was able to expose for the shadow details. That's something you have control on with other cameras. Okay, finally I want to talk about how we can actually use this camera to its fullest extent. First of all, don't use it indoors. Save your money. Don't photograph with this camera inside. The flash is not bright enough to illuminate everything the way that you want. Secondly, photograph only in bright conditions or where spill light is really, really bright. For example, long exposure, quote, long exposure, photography at nighttime of neon signs or brightly lit cityscapes. This will work wonderfully. I don't have any examples here. I'm sorry that I don't have any to share with you, but I do know for a fact that it will because the Polaroid 1 Step 2 will, and it's just basic photography. What you need are bright point sources of light when it gets dark, or a lot of spill light, and that will be very helpful. If you were at Las Vegas or Atlantic City or even the Strip at Virginia Beach, there'd be plenty of light, or like a carnival, there'd be plenty of light at night to photograph with this camera and flash on. Okay, now, what you would need to do is hold the camera extremely still, take a deep breath, breathe in, breathe out. Press the button, hold it, and then go. That would be your best technique to getting as still of shots as you can at nighttime. Something else that we can do is we can actually use an external flash with this camera. Most people aren't familiar with what are called slave functions of most off-camera strobes. Beneath this lens cover right here is actually an electronic eye, a photodiode sensor, right? And so this, or photovoltaic sensor. So this sensor is looking for a bright flash, a quick bright light object. So if you turn your strobe on, and if you put your strobe in the proper menu, in this case, I'm slave 1, channel 1, it will work one or two ways, either with a radio trigger or through light. When this strobe goes off, if this photodiode is pointed facing the direction of that light, and remember this goes out at a wedge, then it will flash when that light is seen. Because light moves so much faster than the mechanical operation of the shutter, you will be able to get a strobe flash at the same time that your camera is being exposed. The next question that you might say is, how do I know what light setting to use on my flash? Well, that's simple. You need a light metering app for your phone. They don't have to cost a lot of money, but what you would do is download the Light Meter app on Android by, I believe his name is Dave Quintas or Quaalude. I don't know. I use that app. It's a free app. You can pay for a paid version with no ads. A Polaroid Go film is a 600 speed film, okay? So we already know that we're around 600, 625 speed. We know it's going to use f12, and it could use any aperture. It doesn't matter. Just use 1/15 of a second as your settings. At that point in time, the wheel will tell you what f-stop you would need. And then you would just count those f-stops for brightness and enter them onto your flash in powers of flash. So like 1/15, if you need another stop of light, starting at 1/4 power, go up to 1/2 power, go up to 1 whole power on this strobe, and then take a test shot. It will require a little bit of back and forth to get it just right, but once you do, and you keep a dope book or a settings book, a log book of your settings, you'll begin to learn what situations require what kind of off-camera flash. And then you can take the photography with this camera all to another level. True, you're carrying around some extra things, but if you're going to do something that's a little bit outside of the ordinary, why not do it with a Polaroid Go? When I talked about this camera, those of you that are still here and watching, I want to thank you. Also, if you are still here and watching, I want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm really trying to get to 10,000 subs this year. It'd be nice for your help. We're around 8,500 right now or something like that. But if we're talking about this camera, right now, as we wrap this up, you may think that all the things I've talked about are reasons not to use this camera. But the reality is they are all excellent reasons to use this camera. It's so much fun and it produces beautiful images. And yes, you are going to have a hit rate that's a little bit rough to consider. You may spend a little bit more money on film to get the types of shots that you want overall, but that's going to make that journey so much more exciting when you get it. And it's why pictures like these and other ones that I've shared right here mean so much to me. It's not because they aren't perfect pin sharp quality or things like that. It's because they represent an event that I did with my family in a way I see it in my mind. And that is something I can't get from Instax. And that's why I absolutely love the little Polaroid Go. So I'm going to take this out and shoot with it now, guys. I'll catch you all on the flip side.